Hello and welcome to this webinar that we have here today, where we will go through how the PPP forgiveness process is working in MoreReporting. We'll just wait a minute and let everybody get joined before we start. Just see the time here. Give it 10 seconds more. Good. So, welcome to this webinar we have today here with MoreReporting. We'll be demoing our PPP forgiveness solution inside of MoreReporting. Presenter today is me, Johan Kolvik, and Sophia, she will be the moderator. So any questions that you write in the chat or in the that you write in the Q&A will go to me. Good, let's get started here now. I'll start by sharing my screen. Good. First of all, we have some news. If you haven't heard it already, the Senate has passed the Paycheck Protection Program Flexibility Act of 2020. I've had a lot of fun reading through this. You probably heard some of it in the media as well. What they're doing is that they are extending the 8-week covered period. They're extending that to 24 weeks. They are also extending the payback time from 2 years till 5 years. And they are extending the safe harbor requirements. They were previously on June 30th. Now they will be on December 31st. I think I can see why that this will be a great relief from a lot of people, because it means that they will be easier for them to get forgiveness or full forgiveness for the amount that they loaned. However, I don't actually think it's solving some problems, but they're creating some new problems. For instance, instead of having 8 weeks where you need to keep very much in control of what you do, you now have 24 weeks, meaning that when you submit the forgiveness, you just close to triple the number of documentation that needs to be sent in. Not full triple, but it's a lot more documentation that needs to be, meaning that you know, if you received your loan in April sometime, the end of the 24 weeks will be in the end of September. That's a long time to cover and make sure make sure you're keeping with the rules. They're also lowering the threshold for payroll cost from 75 to 60. With the extension of the period, I'm not sure that is helping so much either. But you know, it's definitely probably something that someone will see as an improvement. My concern when I look at this is that, especially with the forgiveness extension till the end of the year, that's gonna be. We'll need to get the guidance on this from the SBA after the president have signed it. I think he'll sign it, since it's pretty much only been one vote in entire Congress that has voted against it. So when we get, it'll be signed by the president, and then it will be, the SBA will have to look through it. They will have to update the application form, and they will have to provide some new guidance. My concern is that this will be, because of the safe harbor requirements have been moved so far back, that it in fact will will bind a lot of people to the current configuration of employees that they have. They can obviously replace and so forth, and there are some provisions in the law that says that if you are unable to return to activity levels that you had before the crisis, then you can be exempt from some of these reduction amounts. But it's how to document that is again, we'll need to get guidance from SBA to know this. I don't think this makes the problem smaller. I think this makes the problem bigger, and especially when it, maybe not in spending the money, but in ensuring the documentation and making sure that everything is following the rules. This is a large burden being placed on small businesses, not just for 8-week period now, but for a 24-week period. So with this being said, the form is a funny document. Let me just open one here, and here we have it. And I'm sure that most of you have read through it so far. First 2 pages are pretty straightforward. You get to the alternative covered period. That's where things are beginning to become a little bit more advanced. Then we get into page 2. It's very nice, and then you begin to get into eligible costs, where they talk about incurred costs. I've had a lot of questions around covered periods and incurred costs and so forth. It's basically a mix of cash and accrual. So something is handled cash and some things is handled accrual. It's flexible, but it's something definitely to keep track of. It is also interesting then when we get to this page here, that is quite simple again. There's some information that needs to be collected, and this appears to be simple, but it's getting all of these amounts that gets complicated. Page 4 is a signed document, yay. Page 5 here, we're beginning to get some instructions how to fill out the tables in the worksheets. At this stage here, it's still fairly straightforward. Then you get here to page 7. And then you have the instruction for the salary hourly wage reduction. Now, I read through this and I understand it now, but the first time I read through this, I was like, what the? That's a lot of funny variables that they have here. How is this calculated? What is the point of this? And as I created the calculator, I tried to do it first in Excel and got confused, and therefore I jumped directly over to code and implemented it there because it was actually easier. But they have so many different time periods in play here that it's insane. So this is something, these step 1 till 3 with a lot of sub steps is something that has to be repeated for each employee. And it's different from whether they are on salary or whether they are on hourly wage. So your average annual salary during the covered period, okay, we calculate that, divided with 8, multiplied by 52. That will give us the average annual salary for this period. Cool. Then we need to find the annual salary for the first quarter of the year. Divide them. If the result is less than 0.75, then there has been a reduction that is not allowed, and there will be amounts will be subtracted from the forgivable loan amount. So then they, for some odd reason that I don't understand yet, they make you then add the salary as of February 15, 2020. Other places in the document, it says that you take the salary that covers the 15th of February and multiply that up so it becomes annualized. Okay. Then we have a new period running here. The average annual salary between February 15th and April 26th. Wait a minute. We just had a covered period up here. Why don't you use that? Now we have a new period where we have to find new numbers. If they are equal to or greater, so they measure they measure if the reduction is done between the covered period and first quarter. And then to measure safe harbor, they take two different periods. And then you have to enter the average annual salary by June 30th, which that's the date that now has been postponed till the end of the year. So does that mean that you can reduce someone's salary, and then when you come to the June 30th, you increase it for that payroll, and then you lower it again? That's a good question. I don't have the answer to it. I can notice that both of these are point in time, and this one talks about annual salary, and this one talks about average annual salary. You can also conclude that it's probably not the spirit of the law to, just increase someone's salary for 1 month and then reduce it again. But it's definitely a scenario that needs to be considered. Then we go back to the two original values. So notice that these two values up here are only used to see if safe harbor applies or not. They're actually not used in the calculation. We then take our first quarter here, multiply that by 7.5, because that's the reduction that you allowed. Then you subtract that from the salary that you had in the covered period. It's formulated in a kind of a strange way here. And if we are on a salary worker, as we are in this example right here, we will then multiply that 8 by 8 and divide it by 52. And that will be the reduction that you're going to have. And this is something that has to be repeated for each employee. This is quite complicated. For some of the other stuff, they made a nice table that you can fill out and whatnot. But to fill out each of these cells in the table, you have quite a bit of calculation to go through. This is not an easy calculation. So this is just to show some of the insanity that they were doing here. Now, I have seen a lot of different calculators out there. Yesterday, I got a calculator by a company called NAV. And I'm just going to show you their calculator. It's very short. And there's so many things omitted from it. And there's so many things, actually, it calculates wrong. Because here we have an example. Someone received $100,000 in loan. Then they had payroll cost for $10,000, nothing else, no reductions. And they actually claim that you can get a bigger forgivable amount than you were allowed to, that you spend in money. If whatever calculator you're using, look out and make sure it's calculating right. NAV is a company that has received over $100 million in investments. They are loan specialists and they can't figure out how to make a calculator. Be careful out there, because there's a lot of calculators coming out right now, and I'll switch over to show our calculator right now. And then you can see how it works here. Sophia, did we have any questions we need to handle at this point?
Yes. So one of the questions by Kathy says, for steps 1 to 3, what if you had employees who left of their choosing during that period or started during that period? How do you properly account for changes in people?
So if you have an employee that leaves because of their choosing, according to a rule that has come out, if you are able to fill that position again, you are okay. And it won't, the reduction you have in the FTE shouldn't be included in the reduction you have due to salary. We looked at the salary reduction right here. So if an employee leaves in that period, well, it's actually it's a little funny question, and I'll show you it. Because if we go here, now this is our calculator, and I'll just dive a little bit into it to show you the question here. We have a column over here in the very end where we say weeks worked, and their weeks worked would obviously be shorter because they left, and that would negate any differences that they would have had in that period. So I don't believe that there would be an issue there. Good. So this is the overview that we have in MoreReporting, our client overview. Here we can see all the clients that we have on the platform at the moment. And the PPP forgiveness have been added down here in the, we can simply go and create a new one. I won't do that right now because I already filled one out. But you go and click here in PPP forgiveness analysis, and that will then create a new analysis for you. Now, and that new analysis looks like this. So there's a couple of different settings here. If we start there, we can name them. We can make different versions of them if we want to make forecast and actuals and so forth. Loan amount. This is the new requirement. We've implemented this already, so we can enter automatically whether you want to use the 75% as the current law, or we'll go down to the 60% once this law has been signed and the SBA has processed it. We have the loan disbursement date. They are currently working with 8 weeks. We'll wait until we get the guidance from the SBA before we increase that till the 24, and when that has become the new law. Then we can enter our alternative covered periods here, if that is applicable. Remember that this is only for companies that has a bi-weekly payroll or more frequent, meaning if you have semi-monthly, then you are not frequent enough with the current guidelines. Then we enter the number of employees that we have had employed at any time during the covered period. Now this is an important thing. So if you had someone employed in the first part of the year, and they then left, or you dismissed them, or your clients did, before the covered period starts, they are not included in the covered period, and therefore you don't calculate the forgiveness reduction for them. So the question I answered before was more related to people who were inside of the covered period. If they were before the covered period they left, they are only counted in the FTE section of the reduction. They're not counted in the salary section. Then we have these 2 reference periods that they have introduced back in 19 and the first 2 months of the year, where to calculate the FTE reduction, we'll need to know who was employed in that time, and that's some documentation that needs to be kept as well. So that's why we put it up in the system. We're going to show you that. There's a table where that can be filled out. Then there's this little funny thing here. Auto update non-payroll expenses. Now, this here, we have a new feature. So if you go into the advanced section here and go to the transaction analysis, we have a new page here. I actually pretty much want to just start it from new. And here we can go and filter on many different types of transactions. So we can go and select what period do we want to search in, what accounts do we want to see. So if I want to see all of the expense accounts is here, I would click there and click submit. And now it will filter it at 100 because of performance. Then you increase the filters until you find the transactions you want. But this can be used to select which transactions should be used in the form for PPP mortgage, rent, and utilities. PPP mortgage includes the interest part of payments as well, according to the instructions, I believe, on page 2 of the form. So that is interest, any interest payments that has been that the company has had, and not the amortization, but the interest section only. So by clicking this, they will appear where did my thing go here? If you have auto update non-payroll expenses, if you click this off, you can enter the amount yourself. But if it's clicked on, the system, as you check them in here, this will be updated out here on the screen. The second tab here, you can fill out information. This is not used for the calculation, but this is used to fill out the printed document. We have the ability here to if you press the print button here, download PDF, will generate a PDF document with that is matching the SBA document. And there we would have pre-filled it with all the values that you have and that has been entered into the system. This is a little older one I had right here from earlier today, so that's why all the values hasn't been filled. But this is a way to make it easier to fill out this application form once we get to that. Now, some banks, larger banks, they will make their own forms that you have to kind of fill out in their online systems. But if your clients are dealing with smaller banks and credit unions, they were typically the ones that had to handle the loans manually, if you remember. And these guys typically don't have enough money to fill out, make digital application forms. They simply don't have the development power. So this type of printing this document can make it easier. It can also make it easier to actually fill out the form that the bank will have as well, because you'll see the numbers side by side, and can thus copy it over there. But this is I believe this is a pretty nice feature we have here. Any questions we should handle, Sophia, before we go on?
Yeah, so there's one question by Penelope. Can you change your payroll frequency during the period, and how does that affect the calculation?
That's a really good question. If you change it to a more beneficial one during the period, well, actually, let's see if we have any guidance on this in the document. I do believe do they say here whether it is by the start or by that begins in the first thing? I would put that one in the gray zone. I won't say yes and I won't say no to it. I haven't heard anyone else ask that question. If you can change it, if you can change the period, I think they get really annoyed about it, but I don't know. So it's one of those questions where we will need to get guidance from the SBA to make a clear answer to it. I have not heard what would happen if you, for instance, go from a monthly to a bi-weekly and then you adjust your payroll period afterwards to be more beneficial. It's one of those things, you know, if an audit comes and they say no, but then again, with the 24-week period, I don't think it should be an issue. Our system had made it very flexible that you can, we've simply made input fields from every week. So you can enter whatever is there. So if you, from a system perspective, you'll just change what fields you entered into. We'll just sum them all anyway. I hope that answers the question. Any other questions, Sophia?
Yeah, can this be used with clients not using QBO?
Yes. The only thing that would be different, of course, is that we won't be able to read in the non-payroll expenses here automatically. You'll have to fill them out automatically. But this can actually be used for people who don't use QBO at all.
Okay, and I have one more question. Can you restate the alternative period requirements for semi-monthly payers? Can you use an alternative period?
Nope, you can't. It's the current requirement. Why do I close that all the time? The current requirement, as stated in the document here, is that borrowers with a bi-weekly or more frequent payroll schedule may elect to calculate eligible payroll costs during the 8-week period. that begins on the first day of their first pay period following the PPP loan disbursement date. So reading this as it's written right now, if you have a less frequent payroll, sorry, you have to use the covered period as it's defined up here, which starts on the loan disbursement date. Honestly, I think that this is what they should have done in the Flexibility Act that they just enacted. Was okay, maybe extend the period a little bit, but make this way more flexible. That would have actually been more beneficial than just dumping a load of extra work on people. So that's what I hope they had done, but no, they just extended it because you could argue if you still can't open your restaurant, after 24 weeks, you're still stuck, right? So why don't you make that just more flexible so it actually matches with when you can open? We should hope that everybody can open within 24 weeks, but we never know. What if they open and then there comes a second wave and they have to reclose after a month? So, any other questions, Sophia, at this stage?
Yeah, there's Nicole wants to know more about the EIDL and how that will work with the calculator, and also how to advise her client about that.
EIDL, if you look at the raw calculation, it is no longer a part of it. It is not a part of the forgiveness amount anymore. So therefore, in the calculation, it is not there. I was a little bit surprised because there was a lot of talk about EIDL being your EIDL amount would reduce your forgivable amount. And the only reference I find to EIDL is in these two lines. But it doesn't affect the forgiveness calculation as the current instructions are from the SBA. I'm surprised. I expected it to be there, but it's not there. Maybe it will be returned, but as it is right now, no, it's not there. So our calculation follows this one strictly, and therefore it doesn't include EIDL. Cool. Good. Let's go and look at this calculator, how it's actually filled out. So this is where things becomes a little bit more complicated. So we start by, we stated in the settings that we wanted to have 6 employees. We have this identifier, which is the last 4 digits of their social security number. Then we specify whether their salary or their hourly calculated. And they use that parallel, they kind of have a parallel way of calculating this in the entire form. So here, if it's set to salary, we obviously don't need to fill out how many hours that they work per their hourly wage. But we would need to fill out if they're paid over $100,000 in any period annualized during 2019, or if it is an owner, employee, or self-employed, or partner of the company. We also have the unable to rehire, which can affect the calculation of the FTE. So once we have entered this in, now the form itself splits this up in 3 different values. And I myself find this quite confusing here on page 6. I have to enter the cash compensation for people with less than 100,000. Then I have to enter it for people with more than 100,000. And then I have to enter it here for owner employees. We have collected it into one table simply to make it easier to overview, and then using checkboxes for it. When we fill out the document in the PDF, we'll sort it into each of these 3 values and into the 2 tables that is listed. So you don't have to think about that part. Then we have the 8-week period here. And here you enter how many were paid. Now, if you have a payroll system that works really nicely, that can make summaries based on custom date periods, this you can use that instead of entering this this way. For ourselves, we used a pretty crappy payroll solutions. Then about 1 month ago, we switched to Gusto, and I like this one a lot. But the problem is that Gusto doesn't have all the historic information we have, so therefore I have to look at the have to look at each paycheck to enter the values here. And I found that one of the problems with the form and many of the other calculators that are is that you need to have an Excel by the side where you do all the summing that they want, and then some added calculations. So therefore, I was like, you know what? That's my goal with this one is to make sure you can enter everything in this application. So yes, there's a lot of input fields, but this is to make sure you don't have to have an Excel by the side where you eventually get, if you have multiple clients, there will be a stage where it's a risk of getting confused in what Excels are we using for what document and have they been updated and whatnot. So the goal here is to have everything in one place, and that's why there's a lot of fields. And in this case, I would say we are bi-weekly, so it's only filled out for the even weeks here. Then we have the incurred period here, which can only cover the payroll after one payroll after the end of the covered period. There's actually instances, if you're very lucky in the way that the dates happen, that you should be able to cover a little bit more than one payroll, but only one payroll is allowed. We then sum this up. Then we will enter the and here we check for the 100K cap. So as you can see, these two top people here, they were paid more in the period than is allowed, and therefore we round down to it automatically. Then we have our healthcare cost, retirement, and state taxes that can be added as well. These are specifically the unemployment taxes that is paid or reported to each local state where the client is residing in. We have our weeks worked. Now, this is an interesting question that you find when you begin to fill out and calculate averages. If you had a period, a little bit back to the question that we got before, if you have someone who only works for 2 weeks, do you then divide this with 2, or do you divide it with the 8 period that is actually the 8 weeks that is actually in the period in the covered period? I think the spirit of what they have done here is that you divide it with 8, but I definitely see that some things that it should be divided with the 2 in this case instead. That's why we have left it open, so you can make that decision for yourself. There's no guidance on how to calculate the averages. I think that the way it's written, it leans toward that you have to use the full periods when calculating averages. Then we calculate the FTEs here, where we calculate both the advanced and the simple. For the hourly employee, it's pretty much the same, except now we enter the hourly wages. We enter how many hours that they have worked each week, and then from that we can calculate how much that they were paid. We sum that up again, make sure that it doesn't exceed the total paid cap here. We can enter the healthcare, retirement, and state taxes as well. And then we'll have our total costs and can again calculate the advanced and simple FTEs over here. Okay, this was kind of the simple part. I saw we got some questions. Sophia, you're muted.
Absolutely, yes. So we had a couple of people asking to redefine or just to clarify unable to hire. And I did answer the question, but just to double check with you.
Yeah, so unable to hire is if you have someone, you dismissed them, but you want to get them back, then you're not penalized by that in the FTE calculation. So this is from the people that were employed before the start of the covered period and were dismissed before that happens. Then you want to get them back. That won't penalize you. So when you look at the reference period that you want to divide with, it doesn't you can omit them from that period there.
Perfect. So Shanta Johnson, she missed a part of the showcasing of the calculation. If you can show how to enter the information manually.
So the payroll information, or this information up here? the payroll information or the non-payroll information, how to enter that?
I do not have enough information. Let's
Well,
see. The payroll.
the
Yeah.
payroll, good.
Mm-hmm.
So all of the payroll has to be kind of entered manually. We normally, when things gets booked into QuickBooks, we have to in the calculator, you have to calculate every individual by themselves and then sum them afterwards. And unfortunately, many times when payroll systems they book into QuickBooks, they only give the sums, and therefore and we don't have an integrations with the payroll systems currently. But then again, they don't have information into the non-payroll. So there we are. Um, um, so here in the payroll data for each of the employees that we have here, we would select whether they're hourly or salary. We would select their hourly wage if we have that, and also their annual wage, or the quarterly wage in this case, for 2020. And then we would simply enter how many hours have they worked, or how much were they paid in salary during that period. All of that gets summed up in the end. There we can add the healthcare, retirement, and state taxes as well. And then we get the sums and can calculate the average hours that are needed further down in the calculation, and also the FTEs that are needed.
Mm-hmm.
Now, let's go and look at the salary reduction. So on these two first employees we had here, they had no salary reduction, so they were over the 100,000 K limit, and therefore they are not covered in this anyway. So that's one of the rules that they have made there. Then for the next two employees, we made them that they had both had a reduction in salary. We can see there was, for Ben here, was a 60%. He only had 70% of his original salary, and Alice have only 60% of her original salary. One of them is a salary worker, and the other one is hourly, because the calculations are different, of course. So here in the first column, they want to know, is the safe harbor, does that apply? And there, as we went through a little bit before in the very beginning, we have to enter either what was their annualized salary in the payroll that covers 15th of February, or what was their hourly wage in that same payroll. I guess if they have received some kind of commission, that would have to be factored into this calculation. Then we have the next question they have is then average annual salary or hourly wage between the 15th of February until the 26th of April. Why it's the 26th of April, I don't know. It's a random, strange date, but that's the date they chose. So here we have a lot of weeks, and that's because we're actually going to need weeks 1 to 7 as well. But here from week 7, we have 2 of them, because week 7, 15th of February, starts on a Sunday, which is week 7. It would have been nice if they had somehow tried to align all of these dates a little bit more instead of just doing them randomly, but I think that's an example of how the government can make things more complicated. Anyway, so here, to calculate how much the average salary were from the 15th of February to the 26th of April, we again have the same type of fields that we had up here, where we can enter for each employee how much were they paid in each week. Again, so you don't have to have an Excel by the side if your payroll system can't provide this. If your payroll system can't provide it, you can just take one of the cells and write, 9,755 and forget the rest, because we will still be able to we just sum all the numbers up here. Then, and there are a lot, oops, I think I just managed to go to the next page here. We have our total paid during this period and the total hours, which are used to calculate the average payroll that they would have here. We have 2 other fields that are needed. And one is for salaried workers, and the other one is for hourly workers. There's kind of different options here. For salary worker, it needs to be and sorry, I didn't make these rules. I'm just implementing them. It needs to be from the 15th of February till the 26th of April. But for salaried worker, you need to enter how many hours how many weeks they worked in first quarter. For For the hourly workers, we then calculate their average hourly, average hours per week, and that is then used in the reduction. So, but before we get to the reduction, we have the safe harbor. Again, this one has been moved, or it's supposedly going to get moved once the president signs this. So here we will have to again enter their annualized salary by this date, and why this is average and this one isn't. I think that's the spirit that they have is saying, hey, you're not allowed to have on a low level, then increase it, and then go back low once that pay period is over. But that needs to be entered here. If it's the rule is if you return them to a level that is the same or higher, then safe harbor would apply, and they won't get a salary hourly wage reduction. If it's just $1 less, then safe harbor still applies in the calculation. That's the rule that they say there. It's pretty strict on that. To calculate the safe harbor, we take the original amount that they were paid in first quarter, multiply that by 0.75. That percentage haven't been changed. At least let's see what the SBA does afterwards. Once that has been multiplied by 0.75, we then subtract with how much were they actually paid during this during the covered period, and then based on these, we would divide that by multiply by 8 and divide by 52, I believe. And for these down here, we will multiply that the other way up, so it gets to this amount that is listed here. These are then summed up and are used this here. They're listed both places on PPP Schedule A and also in the main table that we have here. So with this, we can summarize the payroll. We can summarize how much we have paid. We can go in here and look at these transactions here, by the way, so you can see what transactions are behind these numbers, drill into them. And they come directly from the QuickBooks data, unless you, of course, enter the information yourself, in which this will disappear. So from this, we can subtract the hourly salary, hourly wage, and then we'll have the subtotal here. Then we need to calculate the FTD reduction quotient. And this is where we have to go in and again enter how many hours did people work. Sorry, 15th of February till the end of June 19 is one option. There's a second option, which is the first 2 months of 20. There's actually a third option we don't have yet, but that is the seasonality, where they can select any 12 consecutive weeks between, I believe it's the 15th of May and the end of September of 19, and see which one is beneficial for them. That will be added to the application soon. We update this as quickly as things change from the SBA and new guidance comes out. So here we would change these to hourly just for the case of it, and we can enter in how many hours again did they work in this period. If you have the sum, you can just enter that as well. And this is used to calculate then the FTE, and we do that in both the simple and the advanced. So here we will be able to see for this particular person here that they have, according to the advanced, they would have a 0.8. According to the simple, they would have a 0.1, a 0.5. That's simply the different ways of calculating FTEs that the SBA have introduced. Let's just take the sum for the remaining, say they work 10 hours per week as an illustration point. I'll just set these to hourly really quick here. So this is the second period that we have. And again, notice here I would have more employees because it needs to reflect the employees that was employed in any period of time during these 2 months that you have here. Let's see, that would then be 240, and we'll have 80 on the remaining here. Sorry, we'll take 90. So it just becomes a nice even number. I forgot that it was actually 9 weeks. So here we have, oops. Here again, we have the advanced and the simple calculations of the FTEs. Now, we sum this up and make all the 4 combinations that there are. We look at both the advanced and we look at the simple. And as we can see in this example we have here, if you take the first option, which is last year, June, February till June, and you use the simple method, that is the most optimal result that you will get there. You would get a 1. So we calculate all 4 potential quotients and then select the one that is the best one. That is a way that the system tries to optimize the calculations for you. With this one as 1, let's just take and make this one a little less advantageous. So we just get it down a little bit. Yeah, now we have it at 0.9. Then we have the reduction quotient here, and that will then change the forgivable amount. I can see I have a little issue here. So this is something that has been a cause for a lot of debate in how to do this. So this 75, which is now 60% requirement, the way they have formulated it here, potential forgiveness amounts, is a little confusing. We have renamed it to validation because that is what it actually is. You can obviously not be forgiven more than your calculated forgivable amount. So if your loan amount is bigger than that, well, it's still this forgivable amount that would be used. And likewise, your payroll cost is also affected by this. I think when I implemented this new rule here this morning, I forgot to multiply with 100, and that's why that this is showing a little bit funny to hear. So the smallest of these 3 amounts is what turns out to be the forgivable amount, and that's a validation simply to make sure that you cannot get more than you are qualified for. So here we actually calculate the unforgivable loan and the unforgivable expenses as well, because your expenses might be bigger than your loan, or vice versa. So again, as a way to more effectively advise your clients on this is the amount of money you have to pay back, and this is the amount of money that you actually has as an issue here in the unforgivable loan. This little thing will be fixed 5 minutes after this meeting is over. It's fairly simple to fix. Good. So this is our solution for it. One thing I want to add additionally is that over here in the transaction categories, you can actually go in and upload the file that is needed for the documentation there as a PDF, and that can be included in one big PDF that can be printed as a separate document or saved as a separate document that then can be used to upload the documentation that is needed, or simply just save the documentation that is needed. So we've done quite a bit of work in making sure that all documents and requirements that are for the PPP have been saved can be saved inside of MoreReporting, so you have one place where you can keep track of all of this. My general recommendation is that you kind of run a mock audit and say, okay, do we have every document that we would need that is specified on page 10 of the application? Because there's quite a few requirements here of what needs to be saved, what needs to be submitted, and what needs to be saved for a 6-year period. The SBA have said that they will audit everyone who got more than $2 million in loan, but it doesn't mean that if you got less than $2 million that you're on the safe side, at least with the current rules. So it's important that, you know, who has track of what happened in their company 1 year, 2 years ago. 6 years ago is just an insane long time. So it's important to keep these documents up to date, because you can be audited until 26, as the way the rules are right now. Good. Any questions here, Sophia, that we should address?
Yeah. So Kathy was asking me, what if the employees that are listed in the cover period are different than the employees that are listed in January, March period?
Yeah,
Or how is tracked? Yeah.
that's why we have a lot of input fields, because there's a very big chance that the people you have down here in the first 2 months can be different from the people you had here. So that's, between you and the participants here, me and participants here, I think it's a little bit insane that they have made this many periods, because they didn't need to. But yeah, you're right. And that's why we had to make multiple inputs for them, so you can keep track of them. And listing in the documentation, you have to keep track of them. You have to submit it. Yeah.
Another question, what is the cost of the calculator?
The calculator is $50 per month per client, as the talk to David.
Talk to David. Okay. And then, is the webinar going to be available later? Somebody missed the beginning.
Did we make a recording, Sophia?
Yes.
Yeah, then we'll post those. We'll post that webinar, and you can see it from there. Else, we'll actually repeat the webinar on Tuesday next week as well at the same time. And you can also contact us. Now, we are going to have some additional activities. We are going to have a QA session for people who are on the platform and are paying. And it will be an open meeting where everybody can just ask questions, and if we don't know the answer to them, we'll find the answer as quickly as we can. But that is a way to support you in this process, and also in how to do the advisory with your clients here. David, do we have a time for the first Q&A? You're muted, by the way.
Yeah, we do. We the first so we have every Tuesday beginning from next week, every Tuesday and Thursday at 11 o'clock a.m. Eastern time, we'll have PPP training sessions. We have every Wednesday and Friday starting next week, 2 o'clock p.m. Eastern time, we'll have open Q&A sessions in a Zoom environment, much like this, where partners who are signed up on the platform have access to Johan and Sophia to have discussions, questions, and have all the answers that we can provide for you. If you have questions where we don't have the answers, we'll go and find those answers and return back to you, so that we can be your expert team that will help you through this whole process. And as you know, and as Johan have communicated here today, this is a moving target. And so there will be updates, and we're expecting more updates in the future, and that will be included into the calculator as well. But these Q&A sessions every Wednesday and Friday should be able to help you manage this whole process a little easier.
Cool, thank you. So Sophia, can you run the poll? So yes. We have a question here for you. Thank you for everybody who has participated. I will stop sharing my screen here. If you want to get access to the Q&A and training, you need to be a paying client. You can try it out in MoreReporting. There will be some limitations on how many you can calculate on, and you won't be able to print it. You won't be able to save any of the information. But if you want to use MoreReporting for your clients' PPP forgiveness, answer yes to the first question we have here, we'll sign you up and get you started on this process. If you just want to try it out first, we'll get you signed up as well. And if you need to have the sales team contact you, please click on the third option there. Sophia, any remaining questions that we should have here?
Yeah, there's one more. Can people still choose to use the 8-week period or some other period when they have utilized their loan maximum for forgiveness? or
Good
will your
question.
calculator
Waiting
require?
for clarification
Yeah.
from the SBA.
Okay.
I they kind of one of the periods they have in the loan or in the legal document that they have here is that they say that they extend the covered period from June 30th, which is the period in which this, I guess that this actually means that you can apply for money until December 31st as well. We'll get guidance on that, but I actually guess that's a side effect of this from the PPP funds if they haven't received them already. So we'll need to get guidance if this means that you can first apply for forgiveness in January next year, or you can apply for forgiveness once the money have been spent. I'm excited to see what the SBA says to that question. Good. Sophia, you can close the poll now. Any other questions?
Roxanne, I think in one of the examples, one of the expenses was in negative. So she was wondering why that was in negative.
I was looking at that as well. It's fixed a few minutes after this presentation. Good. Anything else?
No, that's it.
Well, we thank you all for participating, and we look forward to be working with you on this. We find this obviously is a challenging time, and it hasn't become less challenging within the last 10 days. But we look forward to be helping you as much as we can on the PPP forgiveness, and we have a dedicated team that is looking into all the requirements coming out and interpreting them and putting them into our calculators. And we're working as much as we need to make sure all this is updated. Thank you all, and have a good rest of your day, and talk to you later. Thank you.
Thank you.